What we're talking about in this session is really alumni engagement, alumni relations and advancement post-COVID. So lessons learned during COVID and how to carry those forward. No strangers to the host of this session, so it's Dr. Bonnie and myself. And Rob is here to join us. Obviously, he's full of great insights and you've met him along the way, so he's here to help us along the way also. Okay, so the way we've split this session up is we're gonna start with the bad. So what negative results have been reported? And then we'll talk about the good. What positive innovations have come from the world of COVID and the pandemic and the tech? So how did technology help? But before we jump into the bad, I would love for Dr. Bonnie to give a bit of a disclaimer and context to what I mean by the bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we move forward really with this session, we recognize there's a lot happening in the world, a lot that has happened in the world. Even as we alluded to during coffee and conversations this morning, the Delta variant is out there. A lot of folks have been through a lot of hardship, lives lost, et cetera. And so, we want to just contextualize that and kind of, identify that's happened and that's where we are. But then really today want to focus on, this idea of segmenting your alumni, outreach and engagement of alumni in a variety of ways. And so when we mean the bad, the good, and the tech, we're really kind of focused on that alumni segment for the rest of this session.
Thank you for putting that into context. So first, just throwing a question out to the group, the bad. So what sort of negative results have been reported when it comes to alumni engagement and your fundraising efforts from 2020 as they carry over and are reported in 2021? Does anyone have any of those results that you would like to share with the group? If not, we have one report by EAB that we can dive into.
I'll just throw out a personal example, and actually, Aaron, this is a curveball. We didn't talk about this before the session, but I put my season tickets on hold. I had not graduated yet, so I was not technically an alumni, but last fall, I put my season tickets on hold, and I know that there were a lot of folks who were impacted and a lot of institutions impacted in similar ways because the season continued, but I didn't feel comfortable last fall cramming into a stadium with thousands of my closest friends. So I'm sure there's lots of similar stories like that around the country.
That's such a great example because what we're about to go into is at a super high level. So, that being the very specific, alumni version of this, I think is great. So even if any of you have a personal story, just like Dr. Bonnie's, as it relates to your own alumni relations team reaching out to you as an alum, does anyone else have any stories like that they'd like to share? I'll just keep moving forward if not. So we have a report from EAB. They talked to 104 advancement shops across the country and how they weathered the fiscal year 2021. Just a couple stats I'm going to throw out there. We can pause if we need to talk about them. But 1 in 4 of those institutions saw a 30% plus decline in fundraising revenues. And I have linked to these studies. So when we send this out, you'll be able to access. Some other quick stats from that same report: 54% of institutions saw dollar declines. 9.4% saw a drop in the value of new gifts and pledges, and 49% saw the declines reach the double digits. So just a few things to think about, from 104 advancement shops. Any comments about any of those stats, or does that resonate with any of you? Does it seem completely off? Did your advancement shop at your institution experience something a little different? Maybe not, because there are some silver linings in that report. 10% growth, so about a third of the institutions from that study grew total dollars by at least 10%, and 15 of the 104 improved on every target KPI. So low number for KPI growth, but they are speaking about every target KPI. So there is a silver lining. And so just same question on the flip side. So what positive innovations came from 2020 for your alumni relations and advancement teams? And again, we'll go into some real examples if no one has a personal story to share. More good news. Here's a quote from Keith Hinkle from Pepperdine. He said, we're seeing people participate who haven't engaged with us in years. One event had over 700 attendees, and they'll continue to take advantage of new digital capabilities long after the pandemic is over. So I think that's probably true, not just from alumni relations and advancement, but from all the other departments that we've talked about this week. But why is this happening? So one of the innovations that I think we can all relate to, both inside and outside of higher ed, is that one shift from expensive and time consuming to quick and low cost. And here we're talking about engagement. So think about events. When we do things online, and we talked a little bit about this earlier today, but it's expensive to host in-person events. So when you're saving money on a venue and catering and staffing, you can reinvest that budget into other campaigns, and they're more accessible. So when you think about this quote here, why are people participating that haven't participated in years? It's because these virtual and remote events and engagements are more accessible. So people with families, people with jobs, people who can't necessarily book a flight and travel across the country, they can do that now. So engagement improved in some ways. Any comments or personal experiences or stories on this one?
I can give an example, Aaron. The Rosen College of Hospitality Management at UCF is in my backyard, and they have a wine and spirits lab, which is, I think, super cool to have a hospitality program, with that. And they've often engaged alumni and invited alumni to events around, a wine and spirits tasting or something like that. Because sessions have been virtual, I recently got an invite to attend a virtual wine and charcuterie tasting, and basically you sign up, you get a shopping list, you run to the local grocery store and pick up your own ingredients, and then participate in this sort of virtual wine and cheese pairing. And the faculty who oversee that wine and spirits lab actually help talk about the various palettes and flavors and interactions and all of that stuff. So super cool concept. Again, to your point about low cost and cost savings, it's actually really reasonable. And so kind of a cool idea to do that event that would have been in person via Zoom call with several hundred of your closest friends. So neat idea. I thought that was kind of cool. And I'm actually probably going to opt into one of those at one of these days.
Yeah, noted for next year's StepEx for our last event to be a wine and cheese pairing.
I actually agree with Dr. Bunny on that note. It's like, but I'm curious as to what are some of you guys' thoughts on what are the benefits of continuing to do these things, or some of the disadvantages to doing them outside of the financial burden. Of course, we know it's a benefit because you save money, but what are some other disadvantages if we continue to do things like this? Where do you think that, I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you think that it's more effective when networking events have people actually meet in person versus virtual? Is there like a degree of difference, or what are some of your thoughts on that?
My personal opinion, and then anyone else can chime in, as it relates to the way I'm working right now with Steppingblocks, is that I think a lot of us feel a hybrid situation is ideal. So we find that some things are easier, when they're remote and virtual, and we find some things are easier when they're in person. So I think when it comes to alumni engagement, I think having a mix. Some people don't want to attend in person. Some people don't find a lot of benefit from doing virtual events. So I think having that mix and continuing that mix, when before, I don't have a number, but I would imagine the number of virtual events that Alumni Engagement hosted was probably much smaller than it is now. So I think a healthy mix of both is probably the best way to go.
Yeah, I would add, Aaron, some of that I think is probably institution or regional specific, depending on the nature of your alumni and where they live, even. I will say, again, kind of more from personal experience, all of my institutions have been in the state of Florida. My undergrad is about 45 minutes to an hour from where I live. Where I went to where I got my master's degree is about 600, 700 miles away. I've never made it to a homecoming there. I have been to the homecoming that's in my backyard. So, I think if that, if my master's program had more virtual events, I'd probably be more likely to attend the virtual events versus in person. Whereas my undergrad, being an hour away, it's a lot easier to get to. So that might be a great way to leverage some of our Steppingblocks data. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about the platforms in a bit, but even just geographic, who is in your backyard versus who's spread out across the country. And you might shape your campaigns in different ways based on their physical access to your campus.
Yeah, I know most of the emails I get from my alma mater around networking events, and especially for younger alumni and friends that really love those to find new jobs, to get more business, et cetera. And you definitely lose that in a virtual environment. Seeing someone's Zoom screen name, you can't necessarily contact them and interact with them. So I think the networking aspect has definitely been a casualty of the virtual transition, but hopefully we can get back to a hybrid model. There's definitely pros and cons to each.
This is a little bit off topic, but when we talk about alumni and the responsibilities or the things that are placed on alumni, those expectations, how do you guys manage fatigue? Or when students are, looking for mentorship, that can be an entire job for an alumni who's working his or her career, yet they're trying to, connect new people from their same institution with opportunities and information and knowledge, et cetera. So do you guys experience people who are just like burnt out on trying to help?
I think actually a really interesting angle to that is similar to faculty. I've got a lot of experience working with faculty, and if there are any faculty on the call or folks who've worked with faculty, you know that the same faculty who volunteer keep getting pulled back in, right? And so one of the strategies from a student success angle is to spread the wealth a little bit, and I would apply that example to alumni as well. If you've got a highly involved alumnus, you might want to continue to reach out to that same person because they're going to come back. But you're exactly correct. They're going to get burnt out. They can't serve on, the oversight group, plus be a mentor, plus lead the cheering section in the football stadium, unless they really want to do all those things. But I think, again, the opportunity there is to try to identify some alumni who haven't had the opportunity to be engaged and might be a really good fit for that particular campaign or program, and try to connect with them in new and different ways.
Yeah, and that's one of the hardest things we actually, in Steppingblocks, an earlier version, we had a mentorship module. So basically, students can request assistance in a certain company or job title or industry even. And we would basically send an email to that person. So we generally have contact information with the vast majority of people, and try to encourage that engagement. That was very difficult. So it was more of I think we had a LinkedIn group. It was like Steppingblocks mentors. So we had a few hundred mentors actually sign up in the early days, but when they get that request, whether it's a LinkedIn message or an email, it was next to impossible to actually encourage that engagement. They could get multiple requests at one time. And we actually saw some, meetings that were planned, but it was not. Weren't successful in actually connecting. So it's extremely difficult to encourage that mentorship, and we've seen that firsthand. So it's actually why we removed it, just because we saw that it wasn't going to be scalable. But I think there are some other platforms that are trying to do it slightly different that might have more success than us. But it's definitely very difficult to encourage that mentorship.
Any other thoughts on this? All right, another shift that came, a positive shift coming, and this leads us into the segmentation, but we're seeing shifts from high level themes to highly targeted communities and themes. So being scalable and having a low cost means being able to narrow those themes that appeal to smaller segments of alumni, and that creates greater sense of community in the end. So now we'll get into how data and technology help support innovation for alumni relations, engagement, and fundraising, specifically through segmentation. So this is an example, and in just a minute, we'll jump into the platform so you can see it working firsthand and in real time. But these are 3 example steps of how you could use Steppingblocks and data and technology to engage and segment your alumni. Identifying campaign goals by first analyzing your alumni. So say if you don't have a good understanding of what your alumni even look like at a bird's eye view, you start there to start building meaningful affinities. Not affinity groups within your alumni, but just affinities. What does that look like? And second, to that next level would be tapping into the data. So starting to filter and segment by really whatever it is that tie into your campaign goals, whether it's geography, demographics, employment, education. There's a number of ways that we'll look at in just a minute. And then 3, using and understanding interest down at the person level to analyze and understand that population even more. So we'll go ahead and look at a specific example of segmentation. So if your campaign idea is top females under 40 in tech, if that's your campaign, say you're hosting an event, but you don't know who these alumni are, that's a place to start. And your filters would look exactly like this: by gender, income, age, and major. So that's how we've filtered this down. And here's what it looks like at a closer angle. So at this point, I think it would make sense. I'm going to pass this to you, Dr. Bonnie, and we can watch this example happening in real time, if that's something that would be useful for this group, which I think that it would. So let me stop sharing.
Sounds good. All right, so let's let's not stare at ourselves here. I am here in Graduate Insights, and I'm going to click on Graduate Explorer. Again, we're using Michigan State as an example, and so I'm going to follow that same set of filters. We're going to do age less than 40. We're going to go to gender female. Major is going to be computer science, and incomes greater than 100,000. And there we are. So we again see kind of exactly what we saw on the previous screen, all of this information, but then this is again the power of the individual data that we have here. So here's that actual list of individuals all the way to their contact information and skills and all of that as well. So any questions from the audience about this set of filters, or kind of how to segment very specifically in this way?
So the next step in that, trying to reach that person, that's an actual email that goes out to that person?
Yeah, so this data is exportable for a variety of reasons. You could absolutely do contact and reach out to that, or again, if you wanted to pull this data here and take a look out at this in relation to the alumni data that you have. But yeah, this is exportable as a CSV at once segmented like this. You might have contact information for some of these same individuals. So an alumni engagement shop may want to export this and then utilize either the information we have in our database or the information that you might already have about those alumni. A couple of different paths forward from that point.
And Dr. Bonnie, you and I talked about another example. If you want to walk through that, and then maybe once you walk through the example of how to build that alumni population, maybe click through a couple of the filters to show how to narrow that even more if someone on this call is interested in going to explore and analyzing their alumni in this way.
Yeah, so this particular example that we provided here is based on information or demographic factors about the alumni themselves. One of the areas where I personally sort of geek out with our data is around specific employers. I know my next door neighbor works for Lockheed Martin, and they have all sorts of events at Lockheed for UCF alumni right here, in Central Florida. It's a huge employer in the area. So another way to think about this is, instead of beginning with a program or alumni, is to really hone into a particular employer or industry. And so I'm going to go in this example, current employees, and again, we're looking at Michigan State. So I'm going to choose General Motors here. And what this at first would give me is everyone from Michigan State who works at General Motors. The opportunity then might be to drill down. So let's think about folks who we could do major here for engineering. And this would then give you the subset of, employees. We're looking now at 128 profiles in General Motors. And so this is incredibly powerful. You could take this information and do a couple of things with it. If you've got employer relations, perhaps collaborating, or even, from a gifts and donor perspective, you could say, hey, General Motors, we have 128 alumni, who are engineers. Have you thought about doing an event or coming to our football games or whatnot? And you'll see this is, engineer, manufacturing engineer, district manager, scientist, electrician. So a variety of different individuals here. You could create an affinity group or try to connect these folks together. Again, as Rob was talking about earlier about networking, do these folks all know that they're Michigan State alumni and perhaps could collaborate together on a variety of things? So again, exportable, could be to interface with an alumni or a point of contact at General Motors, or alternatively could be to send a campaign to these folks and say, we've got a great engineering event or a new engineering building opening up, and specifically invite those folks to come join you for that event. So lots of use cases as to why you do it, but I do think it's interesting to explore it from this company perspective, inverse to the first example, which was focused primarily on major.
Yeah, and I'm sure General Motors matches donations too. Some up to 50%, some up to 100%. So 2,062 alumni, they're just sitting there. You had a custom campaign. They'll remind them that any donation gets doubled. So you talk about thousands and thousands of dollars really quick with one campaign.
Absolutely.